Hello, my name is Frank Wang, and my senior capstone project this year was about how we can implement effective study methods for the freshmen. So my final project and how I tried to incorporate that was I incorporated the teaching of study methods into the freshman seminar class for next year. So next year and hopefully many years to come, there will be a small course and a small portion dedicated to study methods and study skills that will be taught to all freshmen. That will be designed by me. And how I kind of landed on this project was I was always interested in motivation, and that was kind of the thread that carried me through all these different iterations of my project. And just talking to just a multitude of different teachers at the school and kind of asking them what they thought was the gap in our school system and what they thought could be changed with certain classes. And that kind of just let me focus more in on what I wanted to do and what the problem was, and that all just led to study methods being taught in freshman seminar next year. I think the main thing I learned about myself was I learned how extroverted I can be in certain topics because I've always considered myself an introvert, and I still think I am, but kind of seeing how interested and how extroverted I was when I was talking to these teachers and how interested I was, I just feel a lot more confident in my ability going off to college to connect with these professors, connect with these new students that I haven't talked to, because I feel a lot more confident in my ability to just put myself out there with topics that interest me. So this is my project about study skills and why I think they're important and how I think study skills should be taught in our school. So I think the biggest topic when it comes to study skills is time management. And time management is such a big topic, it's such an important topic, and all the teachers recognize its importance and the lack of it in some of these students. So how I want to talk about time management is not in the sense of grades, it's not in the sense of maximizing the time you spend working, it's about maximizing the free time you have. So time management in my mind is about how do I do the things I don't want to do the most efficiently, so therefore I have more time and the most time to do the things I want to do. Right, and that boils down to a couple of things. The first thing is that every single student has a goal grade. They have an acceptable grade where if they drop below that, they feel a tinge of disappointment. So with time management, what we need to find is what's the minimum amount of time I can put into the things I don't like to do, like studying, like homework, while still maintaining my goal grade and still reaching that acceptable grade that I want for myself. And now the biggest piece of time that I think that students are wasting is the time we spend in school. And we are stuck in school. Like we are stuck in school for 6.5 hours every single day, right? And we might as well make the most of it. Because if you don't focus in school, you're going to need to spend more time at your house by yourself. That's cutting into the free time you could have had. If everyone focuses in school, we take diligent notes, we focus on our teachers, we really focus in school, then we need to spend less time at home studying, doing homework, because we already learned the information in class. And that means we have more free time to do the things we want. Along with this, focusing on homework and studying reduces time, not just in the moment, but also down the road. So take homework, for example. If you are focusing on your homework and you're not procrastinating, you're obviously going to be finishing it faster, and you're also learning more, which means that when you go back and study, you already retained more information from focusing on the homework. So it's a win-win. And if you think about it in the sense of the faster I do my homework, the faster I can do the things I want to do, instead of the faster I do my homework, the better it will be. I think that's a good mindset shift for students to have. We are looking for the most efficient ways to do the things we don't like, so we have more time to do the things we do like. And the last thing is that we should focus on the areas we are weakest in, just because this is the most time efficient and the most practical thing, because we don't have an infinite amount of time. And while it may feel good to just do practice problems that you know, it's not efficient because you already know those questions. You should be focusing and working towards the questions that you don't know, the problems that you don't know. Those are the areas you should focus on. And now we're talking about study methods and study skills. I think study skills are extremely easy, and most students know them by heart. They are common sense. So let's just take an example. Which one is the more effective practice strategy? Copying the answers from the key or copying not only the answer, but also the previous steps. Now, obviously, it's the one on the right, because if you only copy the answers, then you don't really know how they got to that answer. You don't know, it's not repeatable. If you copy not only the answers, but also the steps, you understand the rationale behind how your teacher got to that answer, and you can replicate it yourself. These are really common sense based questions, and most students will be able to discern which study method is better. The next one, which one is a more effective practice strategy, rereading your notes or pretending to teach or teaching someone your notes? Now, obviously, the one on the right is also better, because when you teach and when you pretend to teach your notes, you are forced to speak them out loud. You're forced to make sure they make sense to yourself and the person you're talking to, and your audience might ask you questions. All this combined means that if you teach someone your own notes, you yourself learn a lot more about the notes, and you retain a lot more of the information than just you rereading your notes in your mind. Obviously, most students know this, but most students don't apply this to their life. And these are just a couple more. Obviously, cramming is bad and spaced practice is better. Obviously, like I said before, focusing on your homework not only reduces the time, but it also enhances the quality of your studying and doing your homework. It means you learn more from your homework if you're focusing on it instead of being distracted. And then finally, interlevels practice is really important, especially in math. I would say is the biggest one, because you're not trying to build just the pure memorization. You want to know how to recognize the problem and what the difference in between the different problems are. So for math, you don't want to do 10 of one question and 10 of another question, because then your brain is just remembering in that moment, okay, here's how I do these 10 questions, and then goes to the next one and it forgets how to spot these different questions and what the differences between them are. If you interlevel your practice and you randomly throw questions at your brain, it forces your brain to be able to not only recognize, but understand the differences between the different problems and the differences between the different steps that you have to go through to solve each question. And then another really important part of studying is not the actual studying itself, but it's getting to the studying, which is note taking. And obviously for freshmen, which is my audience, they're not taking hard notes most of the time. Most of the time, they don't have a piece of blank sheet and they have to take notes on it. Usually they're given a packet. Usually it's pre-filled out and there might be one or two blanks on each line. And how do you take effective notes when the notes are given to you? Well, the answer is you take notes normally. Okay? These notes are given to you so you have more time to listen to the teacher, so you have more time to annotate your notes. Right? So after you're done filling out that one blank, you should be annotating and further explaining the sentence that your teacher is talking about, because your teacher will often dive deeper than just your notes, and you want to record that information. That is what the teacher is paid to do. They're not paid to read a piece of paper. They're paid to help you as a student understand by making different connections, by reiterating things in different ways. And you should write those down so that when you go back and study, you can remember what your teacher was talking about. And here's also a big point. If you're reading your notes and you read the line that you just filled out and it doesn't make sense to you, then you should annotate it. You should annotate it in a way that makes sense to you. Because if you don't understand it in the moment, then how are you going to understand it 2 weeks later when you're trying to study from it, right? So you have to be annotating your notes in a way that if you look back at it in a couple of days, you will still remember what the teacher was talking about and you don't have to relearn all the information again. And then the final topic I want to talk about, which is self-explanation. And this is sort of like teaching yourself the material, and not teaching yourself the how, but the why, the material. All right, so self-explanation is just a process of speaking out or writing out questions about the notes and then answering those questions yourself. And the main point I want to drive home is this last bullet point. Studying is not done mentally, it is done out loud or on paper. Think about math. How much easier is it to do math on paper than it is in your head? It's because when we put things out into the world, it's easier for our brain to conceptualize. It's easier for our brain to understand the things. Same thing with studying. If you're just rereading your notes in your mind over and over again, it's not going to make sense to you. But as soon as you write them out or speak them out, your brain can put the puzzle pieces into the correct places and your brain can understand them. So in self-explanation, what that looks like is a lot of times writing new questions based on the material, writing them out. writing them or speaking them out, not just thinking about them, and then actually answering those questions. And then if something doesn't make sense to you, if you're answering the question, you're like, oh, wait, this doesn't really make sense. Talk it through. Don't just think about it, talk it through. Because talking it through is always a better way than just thinking it, because your brain can work out the problems easier. And here are just some specific examples of what I think good study methods look like in different subjects. So for math, trying to interlevel your practice and trying to randomize the questions you're receiving. So if the homework is not randomized, I would recommend, instead of going section by section, choosing one question from each section and randomly choosing questions. This way, you can recognize what the difference is in the questions, the differences in the steps, and how to recognize the different problems instead of being told this is the type of question you're dealing with. And every couple of days, you should be going back into the previous questions and into the previous practice questions, which you haven't done, just to refresh. You don't have to do a lot of them, maybe just one or two, but you should be constantly refreshing your memory, so that when you go back and study for the test, you don't have this big block of information you just completely don't remember. And with the self-explanation built in, you should be able to explain the problem. You should be able to explain what each step does, what it accomplishes, when you use it, when you don't use it, and you should be able to explain that for every single type of question. And that's kind of a check you can do before the test. If you can do that, then you're perfect. Then you understand the information. If you can't, if you're stumbling over your words, then you might need to look back at your notes. You might need to ask yourself more questions about the material to make your brain understand it. Another class I want to talk about is global, or your typical history classes. Now, history is a much more higher level thinking than math, since it requires a lot of deeper learning skills like making connections, compare and contrast, cause and effect. So this really all stems from taking notes. And taking notes in history class is different is because of how many connections there are. History and time are a linear thing, and things cause other things to happen, and things happen for a reason. So you should be writing out the causes, the effects. You should be comparing different things throughout your notes. You shouldn't leave those for the studying. Those should be happening while you are actively taking notes. And you should be able to fully explain these different concepts and how they interweave and how they interact with each other. You shouldn't just know the individual isolated events. You should know how these different events influence each other. And these comparisons usually are cause and effect, compare and contrast. So you should be able to explain in this time frame what the different events were, but also how they interact with each other and what some of the causes and some of the comparisons were made in that time period.